The Seattle morning drizzle painted streaks across the floor-to-ceiling windows of our downtown office as I stood by the coffee machine at 6:30 a.m., watching the city wake up 43 floors below. Pike Place Market was already bustling with vendors setting up their stalls, and the familiar hum of early commuters filled the streets like a symphony I'd grown to love over the past 12 years. My name is Marcus Chun, and at 38, I had built my entire adult life around Sterling and Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm specializing in international trade partnerships. The company occupied 3 floors of the Columbia Center, with panoramic views of Elliott Bay, Mount Rainier, and the Olympic Mountains on clear days like this one. What started as an entry-level analyst position had evolved into something I never expected. I had become the company's secret weapon for navigating complex Asian markets. Fluent in Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, and conversational in Thai and Vietnamese, I understood cultural nuances that could make or break million-dollar deals. My colleagues often joked that I was worth my weight in gold, but I prefer to think of myself as a bridge between worlds. The elevator chimed at exactly 6:47 a.m., interrupting my morning ritual. Out stepped Brandon Sterling, the 28-year-old son of our founder, Richard Sterling. Brandon had returned from his MBA at Wharton 8 months ago, armed with theoretical knowledge, $200,000 in student debt that Daddy had paid off, and an insufferable sense of entitlement that seemed to grow stronger every day. His tailored Tom Ford suit probably cost more than most employees made in a month, and his slick-back hair gave him the appearance of someone desperately trying to look like a Fortune 500 CEO. The Rolex Submariner on his wrist caught the morning light, a graduation gift from his father that cost more than my car. "Marcus," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. His voice carried that particular brand of arrogance that comes from never having to prove yourself, never having to wonder if you'll make rent, never having to choose between fixing your car and taking your daughter to dinner. Conference Room B. Now, the command stung, but I'd learned to pick my battles. I followed him down the hallway, past the cubicles where my colleagues were just settling in for the day. Sarah from accounting gave me a concerned look. Office gossip traveled fast, and everyone knew Brandon had been making changes since his father had gradually handed him increasing responsibility over the past few months. 3 senior employees had already been restructured out of their positions. Margaret Walsh, who had built our European partnerships from nothing, was let go for being too set in old-school methods. David Kim, our brilliant financial analyst who had prevented 2 major investment disasters, was dismissed for lacking vision. And just last week, Patricia Hernandez, who had managed our South American contracts with unprecedented success, was terminated for cultural inflexibility. All 3 had been replaced with recent MBA graduates who talked big, but had never closed a deal worth more than their signing bonuses. Brandon didn't sit down when we reached Conference Room B. He stood behind the head chair like he was delivering a State of the Union address, hands clasped behind his back in a pose I'm sure he'd practiced in the mirror. The Seattle skyline stretched behind him through the windows, Mount Rainier visible in the distance on this rare, clear morning, the ferries cutting white lines across the steel-gray water of Puget Sound. "Marcus, this company is moving in a new direction," he began, his voice dripping with false authority. "We're in the 21st century, and we need to think like 21st century companies. Streamline our operations, eliminate redundancies, and frankly, some people just don't fit our vision for the future anymore." My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. 12 years of negotiating with difficult clients, from temperamental tech executives in Silicon Valley to traditional family business owners in rural Japan, had taught me to control my reactions. Never let them see you sweat. My first mentor had told me, the moment you show weakness, you've lost the negotiation. "I'm letting you go," he continued, as casually as if he were ordering his usual oat milk latte from the barista downstairs. "Effective immediately. We're pivoting away from these niche Asian markets. Too complicated, too much cultural handholding, too much bowing and ceremony. We need people who can think bigger picture, who can scale operations efficiently, not get bogged down in tradition and ancestor worship." The words hit me like a physical blow. Cultural handholding? Ancestor worship? I had spent 12 years building relationships with our most profitable clients, learning not just their languages, but their customs, their business practices, their family traditions, their children's names, their favorite restaurants, their deepest concerns about expanding into American markets. I had closed deals that others couldn't even get meetings for. The Yamamoto Group contract alone had brought in $3.2 million last year. The Seoul Electronics partnership was worth $8.7 million over 5 years. The Bangkok manufacturing deal had opened doors to 3 other Thai companies, creating a pipeline worth over $15 million. But more than the numbers, I had earned something far more valuable: trust. In cultures where business relationships could take years to develop, where a single misstep could end negotiations forever, where honor and face meant everything, I had built bridges that competitors could only dream of crossing. "Brandon," I said carefully, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest, "the Yamamoto Group contract alone brought in $3.2 million last year. The Seoul Electronics partnership generated $8.7 million over 5 years. The emerging markets division that I built accounts for 43% of our total revenue." "That's exactly the problem," he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively like he was shooing away a fly. "We're too dependent on foreign markets, on relationships that could disappear overnight. What happens if there's another trade war? What happens if these countries decide to work with local companies instead? We need to focus on domestic opportunities, American companies, American values, American efficiency. Simpler, more predictable, more scalable." I felt my jaw clench. "Brandon, these relationships don't just disappear overnight. They're built on years of mutual respect, cultural understanding." "Cultural understanding?" He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that made my skin crawl. "Marcus, you're living in the past. Business is business. Numbers are numbers. Results are results. All this cultural sensitivity nonsense is just expensive overhead that we can't afford anymore." He walked around the table, getting closer to me, his cologne, something expensive and cloying, filling the space between us. "You can pack up your desk. Security will escort you out. And Marcus..." He paused dramatically, as if he were delivering the punchline to a joke only he found funny. "Don't bother asking for a reference. The future is about innovation, not tradition." For a moment, I felt the urge to argue, to list every success, every late night, every weekend I had sacrificed for this company. I wanted to tell him about the time I flew to Tokyo with food poisoning because Mr. Yamamoto had specifically requested that I attend his daughter's wedding, an honor that led to 3 new client introductions. I wanted to explain how I had learned to use chopsticks properly, how I had studied the tea ceremony, how I had memorized the family histories of dozens of clients because it mattered to them. I wanted to tell him about missing my own daughter's school plays because I was on video calls with clients in different time zones. About learning to function on 4 hours of sleep because that's what it took to build something real, something lasting, something that mattered. Instead, I stood up slowly, straightened my tie, a silk tie that Mr. Yamamoto had given me for Chinese New Year, embroidered with symbols of prosperity and longevity, and smiled. Not the bitter smile of defeat, but the calm, measured smile of someone who knew something the other person didn't. "I understand," I said, extending my hand. "Good luck with the new direction, Brandon. I hope it works out exactly as you planned." Brandon looked surprised by my composure. He shook my hand with the weak, soft grip of someone who had never done manual labor in his life, never fought for anything, never had to prove his worth through anything other than his last name. Walking back to my desk felt surreal. The office buzzed with its usual energy. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the coffee machine gurgling in the break room, the soft murmur of colleagues discussing weekend plans and quarterly projections. My team members watched with a mixture of sympathy and fear as I began to pack my personal items into a cardboard box that Sarah had quietly brought me. A framed photo of my daughter Emily at her high school graduation, valedictorian with a full scholarship to the University of Washington's pre-med program. A small jade dragon that my grandmother had given me for luck when I started at Sterling & Associates, worn smooth by 12 years of nervous touching before important presentations. The business card holder carved from bamboo that Mr. Yamamoto had gifted me after our first successful deal, inscribed with Chinese characters meaning patience and persistence bring success. A coffee mug from the Seoul Electronics Factory tour, signed by their CEO with a message in Korean that translated to friendship transcends borders. A small Buddha statue from the Bangkok office, given to me by the entire Thai team after we closed their first American distribution deal. A fountain pen set from the Kuala Lumpur Partnership Celebration, engraved with my name in 4 languages. Each item told a story, represented a relationship, embodied years of careful cultivation and mutual respect. To Brandon, they were probably just foreign trinkets. To me, they were proof of something he would never understand. That business at its highest level isn't about transactions, it's about trust. Jenny Martinez, my closest friend in the office and the head of HR, appeared in my cubicle. Her usually perfect makeup was slightly smudged, as if she'd been crying, and her hand was shaking slightly. "Marcus, what the hell is happening?" I wasn't consulted about any termination. There's no paperwork, no documentation, no performance reviews indicating any problems. This is completely irregular. Ask the new boss, I said quietly, not wanting to make things harder for her or anyone else. Jenny had her own family to think about, her own mortgage to pay. Getting fired for standing up for me wouldn't help anyone. "This is insane," she whispered, her voice tight with anger. "You're our top performer in international markets. Your client satisfaction scores are perfect. Your revenue generation is off the charts. There's no legal basis for this termination." I looked around at my colleagues, some of whom had gathered at a respectful distance, pretending to work while clearly listening to our conversation. Tom from accounting, who I'd helped secure a loan for his son's college tuition by connecting him with a client who needed financial consulting. Sarah from reception, whose husband I'd helped find a job at one of our Korean partner companies. Mike from IT, who I'd brought authentic ramen from Tokyo after he'd spent 3 straight nights fixing our server issues before a crucial presentation. These weren't just co-workers, they were friends, almost family. And now they were watching me get humiliated and dismissed like a piece of outdated equipment. "Jenny," I said softly, "Brandon is the boss's son. He doesn't need a legal basis. He just needs daddy's permission, and apparently he has it." But even as I said it, something nagged at me. Richard Sterling had built this company from nothing through careful relationship building and strategic partnerships. He was tough but fair, demanding but respectful. The casual cruelty of Brandon's dismissal didn't match the leadership style that had created Sterling and Associates' reputation for integrity and excellence. As security escorted me to the parking garage, 2 guards who looked as uncomfortable as I felt, mumbling apologies about just doing their jobs, I felt numb. 12 years of my life, reduced to a cardboard box and a walk of shame through the lobby where clients and partners regularly visited. But as I drove through the familiar streets of Capitol Hill toward my Queen and apartment, something else began to stir beneath the numbness. Not anger, exactly, but a growing sense of curiosity mixed with anticipation. Why now? Why fire me just 3 weeks before the biggest deal of my career was set to close? The Sakura Industries contract had been 18 months in the making. I had flown to Tokyo 8 times, spending my own vacation days to extend trips for relationship-building activities. I had attended Mr. Tanaka's father's funeral, sitting through a traditional Buddha ceremony I barely understood but knew was important. I had learned to play Go well enough to lose gracefully to Mr. Tanaka's teenage son during family dinners at their home in Shibuya. I had spent countless hours in video calls that stretched past midnight due to time zone differences, my own family dinners growing cold, while I carefully navigated cultural sensitivities and business requirements. I had gradually built trust with Hiroshi Tanaka, Sakura Industries' notoriously particular CEO, a man known throughout Japan for his perfectionism and his loyalty to long-term partners. The contract was worth $12 million over 3 years, the largest single deal in Sterling and Associates history. But more importantly, it was structured as a gateway agreement. Success with Sakura would open doors to their subsidiary companies, their supplier network, their business associates. We were talking about potential partnerships worth $50 to $100 million over the next decade. Even more importantly, the contract contained a clause that I had specifically negotiated after a similar deal had fallen apart at my previous company 7 years ago. I was designated as the sole authorized representative for all negotiations and final approvals. It was an unusual arrangement, but Mr. Tanaka had insisted on it after working with me for over a year. Trust is built between people, not companies, he had told me in perfect English, though he preferred to conduct most business in Japanese. I have seen too many deals destroyed when companies change representatives in the middle of negotiations. If Sterling and Associates wishes to do business with Sakura Industries, it will be through Marcus Chun, or it will not be at all. The clause was ironclad, drafted by both companies' legal teams and signed by Richard Sterling himself. Brandon couldn't have known about that clause. Hell, I doubted he had even read the contract, despite the fact that copies had been circulating in management meetings for the past 6 months. My phone rang as I was unlocking my apartment door, juggling my keys and the cardboard box. The caller ID showed Richard Sterling's personal number. Marcus. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger, the kind of controlled fury that comes from years of executive training. What the hell happened today? Jenny just called me in a panic asking about your termination paperwork, and I have no idea what she's talking about. I set my box down on the kitchen counter next to the espresso machine that had been a Christmas gift from the Yamamoto Group. The irony wasn't lost on me. Your son fired me this morning, Mr. Sterling. He said the company was moving away from Asian markets and focusing on domestic opportunities. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Through my apartment window, I could see the Space Needle and the Olympic Mountains beyond, the same view that had convinced me to pay extra rent for this place 12 years ago when I was just starting out. He what? Richard's voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that executives use just before they destroy someone's career. Marcus, the Sakura Industries' final signing is scheduled for next Monday. You're supposed to be on a plane to Tokyo this weekend for the preliminary meetings. I'm aware of the timing, sir. Jesus Christ. I could hear papers rustling frantically, the sound of someone searching through files with increasing desperation. Marcus, please tell me you briefed someone else on this deal. Please tell me there's a backup plan, some kind of contingency protocol. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. This was the moment of truth, the moment when Brandon's arrogance would collide with reality. Mr. Sterling, you'll need to check the contract terms. Specifically, Section 4.7 regarding authorized negotiation representatives. More silence, then the sound of pages turning frantically, followed by the distinctive sound of Richard Sterling's reading glasses being put on. A nervous habit I'd observed in dozens of meetings over the years. Oh fuck. The usually composed Richard Sterling never swore, at least not in front of employees. Marcus, you're the only one who can sign this deal. Legally, the contract specifically names you as the sole authorized representative for all negotiations, amendments, and final approvals. Yes, sir. Mr. Tanaka insisted on that clause after their previous deal with Henderson Corporation fell through due to multiple representatives giving conflicting information and contradictory promises. And my son fired you. It wasn't a question. It was the sound of a man watching his life's work crumble in real time. The sound of 30 years of careful reputation building threatened by one moment of spectacular stupidity. 3 weeks before the final signing, I confirmed. 18 hours after he told me that cultural sensitivity was expensive overhead and that American business should focus on American values. The line went dead. I walked to my living room window, which offered a perfect view of Elliott Bay. The ferries were making their regular runs to Bainbridge Island, tiny white specks against the gray water, carrying commuters home from their downtown jobs. The tourist boats were heading back from whale-watching excursions, their passengers probably sharing photos and stories of Pacific Northwest orcas. Everything looked normal, peaceful even, like any other Thursday evening in Seattle. But I knew that across town in the Sterling and Associates office, panic was beginning to set in like a slow-moving avalanche. My phone started buzzing with text messages at 6:23 p.m. Jenny, HR, what the actual fuck is happening? Richard just stormed through the office looking like he was about to commit murder. Tom, accounting, dude. Heard you got fired. That's completely insane. Everyone's talking about it. Sarah, reception. Brandon just ran out of his office looking like he saw a ghost. Security said he was asking about your home address. What did you do? Mike, IT Marcus, man, this is crazy. Half the office is updating their resumes. What's going on? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I made myself a cup of jasmine green tea, the expensive kind that Mr. Tanaka had given me from his personal collection, shipped directly from a tea garden in Shizuoka, and sat down to think. The apartment felt different now, quieter somehow. Without the constant buzz of work emails and phone calls, I could hear the city sounds through my windows, traffic on Queen and Avenue, the distant hum of the monorail, the occasional ferry horn from Elliott Bay. Sounds I've been too busy to notice for years. I thought about my daughter Emily, now in her second year of pre-med at UW. The tuition payments that would be coming due next month. The health insurance that I just lost. The retirement account that was supposed to fund my eventual escape from the corporate world. But strangely, I wasn't panicking. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was the growing realization that Brandon had made a mistake so colossal, so fundamentally stupid, that it was almost impressive in its thoroughness. At 7:45 p.m., my phone rang. Brandon's number. I let go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Then again. By 8:15 p.m., I had 17 missed calls from various Sterling and Associates numbers. Brandon, Richard, Jenny, even the night security guard. Finally, I listened to Brandon's voicemail. His voice had lost all of its morning arrogance, replaced by something that sounded suspiciously like panic. Marcus, hey, this is Brandon. Look, there might have been some miscommunication this morning. Dad wants to talk to you about the Sakura deal. Can you call me back? It's pretty urgent. Like, really urgent. Please call me back. Miscommunication. Not I made a mistake, or I'm sorry, or I was wrong. Miscommunication. As if firing me had been a simple misunderstanding rather than a calculated decision to humiliate me in front of my colleagues. The calls kept coming. By 9:30 p.m., even the cleaning staff was calling me. Apparently, word had spread that the Sakura deal was in jeopardy, and everyone in the building knew that deals falling through meant layoffs, budget cuts, and canceled contracts with service providers. I finally answered when Jenny called for the 8th time. Marcus, thank God, she said, her voice frantic with relief and desperation. You need to get down here. Richard is talking about shutting down the entire Asian markets division if this deal falls through. That's not just 15 jobs. Marcus, that's 15 families, 15 mortgages, 15 sets of kids' college funds. That hit me in the gut like a physical blow. My colleagues, good people with families and dreams and responsibilities, were about to pay for Brandon's arrogance. Tom, whose son was a freshman at Seattle University. Sarah, whose daughter was starting high school and dreaming of becoming a veterinarian. Mike, whose wife was pregnant with their first child. What exactly does Richard want? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. He wants you back. Full reinstatement, immediate promotion to Director of International Relations, a 20% salary increase, and Brandon is no longer involved in any client-facing decisions. Ever. I looked out at the Seattle skyline, the lights beginning to twinkle as evening deepened into night. The Space Needle stood illuminated against the darkening sky, a symbol of the city's ambition and resilience. I'd built my life here, made my home here, raised my daughter here. This wasn't just about a job. It was about my entire world. And what does Brandon say about that? I asked, though I could probably guess. Jenny's laugh was bitter and exhausted. Brandon is having a complete meltdown. He's locked himself in his office and won't come out. Richard had to physically restrain him from calling Mr. Tanaka directly to try to salvage the deal himself. The image of Brandon trying to negotiate with Hiroshi Tanaka almost made me laugh out loud. Mr. Tanaka was a master of subtle communication, a man who could convey volumes with a slight pause or a barely perceptible change in tone. He spoke 5 languages fluently and had been doing business internationally since before Brandon was born. Brandon would have been eaten alive in the first 5 minutes. Jenny, there's something else you need to know, I said slowly. The Sakura contract isn't just about $12 million. It's structured as a gateway agreement. If we succeed with this deal, Sakura has indicated they'll introduce us to their subsidiary companies, their supplier network, their business associates throughout Asia. We're talking about potential partnerships worth $50 to $100 million over the next decade. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out like a hell breath. How much? Jenny whispered. 50 to 100 million. Minimum. And that's just the opportunities we know about. In Asian business culture, success with one prestigious client opens doors that can't be opened any other way. Sakura Industries is one of the most respected manufacturing companies in Japan. Their endorsement would be like getting a letter of recommendation from Warren Buffett. And Brandon threw it all away because he thought cultural sensitivity was too expensive. He threw it away because he wanted to feel important, and I represented everything he couldn't understand or control. After a long pause, Jenny said quietly, Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay, are you going to come back? Because if you're not, I need to start preparing for the worst. I need to start figuring out how to tell 15 families that they're losing their jobs because the boss's son decided to play CEO without reading the contracts. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders like a familiar coat. These weren't just abstract employees. They were people I'd worked with for years, people who'd covered for me when I was traveling, people who'd celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges. I'll come in, I said finally, but not to save Brandon, to save everyone else. Thank you, Jenny whispered, and I could hear the relief in her voice. Richard wants to meet with you first thing tomorrow morning. And Marcus, whatever you decide to do, just make sure Brandon understands the consequences of what he did. Really understands. When I walked into the Sterling and Associates lobby at 7 a.m. the next morning, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, and I could feel every eye in the office tracking my movement. I wasn't wearing the same clothes I had been fired in. I'd gone home and changed into my best suit, the navy blue Armani that I saved for the most important client meetings, the one that had been custom-tailored in Hong Kong during a business trip 2 years ago. If I was going to walk back into this office, I was going to do it with dignity. The receptionist, Sarah, looked like she hadn't slept. Her usual bright smile was replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a worried expression that made her look years older. Mr. Chun, she said, standing up so quickly she nearly knocked over a coffee cup. Mr. Sterling is waiting for you. He asked me to bring you up the moment you arrived. Richard Sterling was waiting for me at the elevator. At 62, he usually carried himself with the confident bearing of a successful executive, but today he looked every one of his years. His usually perfect silver hair was disheveled, his tie was loosened, and there were stress lines around his eyes that I had never noticed before. Marcus, he said, extending his hand, I owe you an apology. A profound, sincere apology that I'm not sure words can adequately express. I shook his hand, but didn't respond immediately. We rode the elevator to his corner office in silence. The only sound of soft jazz music that played in all Sterling and Associates elevators. A touch of class that Richard had insisted on when they moved to this building 5 years ago. His office overlooked Pioneer Square, with a view that took in both the waterfront and the historic district where Seattle had first been built. He had founded this company 30 years ago in a basement office near here, working 18-hour days and living on ramen noodles and determination. Photos on his walls chronicled its growth from a 2-person operation to our current 80-employee firm. Sit, please, he said, gesturing to the leather chairs arranged around a small conference table near the windows. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Something stronger? I know it's early, but frankly, I could use a drink. Coffee would be fine, thank you. He poured 2 cups from an expensive espresso machine that occupied a corner of his office, his hands shaking slightly as he handed me mine. He sat down heavily in the chair across from me, suddenly looking older than his years. Marcus, I gave my son too much responsibility too quickly. he began, his voice heavy with regret. I wanted him to prove himself, to earn the respect of the team, to learn the business from the ground up. Instead, he nearly destroyed the most important deal in our company's history. I sipped my coffee and waited for him to continue. It was good coffee, single-origin Colombian beans that probably cost more per pound than most people spend on groceries in a week. The Sakura contract isn't just about the $12 million, he said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. It's about establishing us as a major player in the Pacific Rim market. If we pull this off, it opens doors to contracts worth 50, maybe 100 million over the next decade. But more than that, it validates our approach, our commitment to relationship-based business practices. I'm aware of the implications, I said quietly. And you're the only one who can make it happen. Not just because of the contract terms, but because Tanaka trusts you. He specifically requested that you handle the final negotiations personally. I've never seen anything like the relationship you've built with him and his team. Richard stood up and walked to the window, his back to me, looking out at the Seattle skyline. I'm offering you the Director of International Relations position. Significant salary increase, 30% above your current level. Equity stake in the company, 2% ownership with options for more based on performance. Full autonomy over all Asian market operations, your own budget, your own team. You'll report directly to me, not to Brandon. It was a generous offer. More than generous. It was the kind of offer that would change my life, secure my daughter's future, set me up for early retirement if I wanted it. But generosity wasn't what I was looking for right now. Where's Brandon? I asked. Richard's shoulders tensed visibly. In his office. He's struggling to process what happened yesterday. I don't think he fully understood the magnitude of his mistake until I showed him the Sakura contract this morning. I'd like to speak with him. Richard turned around, surprise evident on his face. Marcus, I don't think that's necessary. He's not in a rational state of mind right now. He spent most of the night researching Sakura Industries, trying to understand what he'd done. I think he finally realizes the scope of his error. I think it's very necessary, I said firmly. If I'm going to come back to this company, if I'm going to trust that this won't happen again, I need to look him in the eye and understand what he's learned from this experience. After a long moment, Richard nodded slowly. Conference room B. I'll have him meet you there in 10 minutes. Brandon Sterling walked in a conference room B exactly 10 minutes later, and he looked like a completely different person from the arrogant executive who had fired me 26 hours earlier. His usually perfect hair was messed up as if he'd been running his hands through it compulsively. His expensive shirt was wrinkled and had what looked like coffee stains on the sleeve. His tie was crooked, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept at all. Most tellingly, his arrogant swagger was completely gone, replaced by the hesitant movements of someone who had just discovered that actions have consequences. Marcus, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. His voice was hoarse, as if he'd been shouting or crying, or both. Look, about yesterday morning. You called me culturally narrow. I interrupted, keeping my voice calm but firm. You said I was bogging the company down with tradition and ceremony. You dismissed 12 years of relationship building as cultural handholding and ancestor worship. His face flushed red, the color spreading from his neck up to his ears. I was trying to make changes, to modernize our approach, to bring some efficiency to... You were trying to feel important, I said, cutting him off again. You saw an employee who had been here longer than you, who had relationships you didn't understand, who had expertise you couldn't replicate, and you decided I was a threat to your authority. That's not, he started, then stopped, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. The Sakura Industries deal that you nearly destroyed represents 18 months of relationship building. 8 trips to Tokyo, most of them on my own vacation time. Countless hours learning about Mr. Tanaka's business philosophy, his family history, his cultural values. I attended his father's funeral, Brandon. I sat through a Buddhist ceremony I barely understood because it was important to him. Brandon slumped into a chair, all the fight gone out of him. I know, he whispered. I spent all night reading about Japanese business culture. I had no idea. I didn't understand. You didn't understand because you didn't want to understand, I continued. You saw cultural sensitivity as weakness, relationship building as inefficiency, respect for tradition as backwardness. You wanted to apply American business practices to Asian markets without recognizing that what works in New York doesn't necessarily work in Tokyo. He looked up at me with something that might have been desperation. I fucked up, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I really fucked up. I almost destroyed everything my father built. It was the first completely honest thing he had said to me since returning from Wharton. Yes, you did, I agreed. But the question now is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to learn from this? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I don't know, he said finally. I thought I knew everything about business. Thought an MBA from Wharton meant I could walk into any situation and fix it, optimize it, make it more efficient. I thought experience was just old-fashioned thinking. And now I realize I don't know anything. Not really. I know theories and models and case studies, but I don't know how to build trust with someone who speaks a different language. I don't know how to navigate cultural differences. I don't know how to earn respect instead of demanding it. I studied his face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus self-pity. Brandon, can I ask you something? Sure. When you fired me yesterday, did you feel powerful? He winced as if I'd slapped him. Yeah, he admitted quietly. Yeah, I did. I felt like I was finally in control, like I was making the tough decisions that needed to be made. And how do you feel now? Like an idiot. Like a child who broke his father's most valuable possession. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and stress. Marcus, is there any way? Can you fix this? Can you save the deal? I stood up, straightening my jacket. I can try, but I'm not doing it for you, Brandon. I'm doing it for the 15 families whose jobs depend on this contract. I'm doing it for your father, who built this company through hard work and integrity. I'm doing it for Mr. Tanaka, who trusted Sterling and Associates to honor our commitments. He nodded, looking like he was fighting back tears. I understand. And Marcus? I know you have no reason to believe me, but I want to learn. I want to understand how to do this right. We'll see, I said. Actions speak louder than words, especially in business. Prove to me that you're serious about changing, and maybe we can talk about it. As I reached for the door handle, Brandon spoke again. Marcus? How did you know I hadn't read the contract? How did you know about the authorized representative clause? I turned back to look at him, because someone who had read it never would have fired me 18 hours before the most important signing in the company's history. Someone who understood the implications never would have risked a $12 million deal to make a point about efficiency. I paused at the door. And Brandon? In Japanese business culture, there's a concept called nemawashi, building consensus behind the scenes before making major decisions. You fired me without consulting HR, without reviewing my contracts, without understanding the implications. That's not efficiency, that's recklessness. The next 72 hours were a blur of frantic preparation and damage control. The Sakura Industries signing was scheduled for Monday morning Tokyo time, which meant Sunday evening in Seattle. We had less than 4 days to rebuild a relationship that Brandon had nearly destroyed with a single arrogant decision. My first call was to Mr. Tanaka's office in Tokyo. It was 2 a.m. their time, but I knew his assistant, Yuki Sato, often worked late. She answered on the second ring. Moshi, Sakura Industries, came her familiar voice. Yuki-san, it's Marcus Chun from Sterling and Associates. I apologize for calling so late. There was a pause. Chun-san, we received a very strange phone call yesterday from someone claiming to be the new head of your Asian operations. A Mr. Brandon Sterling. He seemed to believe he could conduct our final negotiations. My heart sank. Brandon had already called them. Yuki-san, I need to speak with Tanaka-san as soon as possible. There has been a serious misunderstanding. Tanaka-san was quite concerned. He specifically requested that all communications go through you, as stated in our agreement. This Mr. Sterling seemed unaware of this arrangement. I closed my eyes, imagining Brandon's phone call, probably brash, probably condescending, definitely culturally tone-deaf. What exactly did he say? He introduced himself as the new point person for efficiency optimization and suggested that our contract negotiations had been unnecessarily complicated by cultural considerations. He offered to streamline the process and complete the signing via video conference. I felt physically sick. In Japanese business culture, suggesting that traditional practices were inefficient was deeply insulting. Offering to replace an in-person signing with a video call was even worse. It implied that the relationship wasn't important enough to merit proper respect. Yuki-san, I will be on the first flight to Tokyo. Please tell Tanaka-san that I personally guarantee Sterling and Associates will honor all aspects of our agreement, exactly as negotiated. Chun-san, her voice softened slightly. Tanaka-san values his relationship with you very highly. He is willing to meet, but he is, how do you say, concerned about the direction of your company. After ending the call, I immediately booked a flight to Tokyo departing Saturday morning, the earliest I could manage given the need for visa arrangements and meeting preparations. Then I called Richard Sterling. The damage is worse than we thought, I told him. Brandon called Tanaka's office directly. He told them cultural considerations were unnecessarily complicating the process and offered to complete the signing via video conference. The silence on the other end was deafening. Richard, are you there? I'm here, he said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. What did Tanaka say? He's willing to meet with me personally, but he has serious concerns about the company's direction. In Japanese business culture, Brandon's call was deeply insulting on multiple levels. Jesus Christ. Okay, what do you need? I need complete authority to negotiate terms if necessary. I need Brandon nowhere near this deal. Not on calls, not in meetings, not even mentioned in our communications. And I need you to trust me to handle this my way. Done. Anything else? I need a formal letter from you, as CEO, apologizing for the confusion and reaffirming your personal commitment to our partnership with Sakura. It needs to be on company letterhead, signed and sealed, and it needs to acknowledge that cultural sensitivity is not just important to Sterling and Associates, but fundamental to how we do business. I'll have it ready within an hour. That evening, I worked until 2 a.m. preparing for the Tokyo trip. I reviewed every aspect of the Sakura contract, researched recent developments in their industry, and prepared traditional gifts for Mr. Tanaka and his team. Carefully selected items that showed respect for their culture without being overly elaborate. I also spent time crafting what would be the most important presentation of my career, not just about contract terms and business arrangements, but about trust, respect, and the future of Sterling and Associates' commitment to international partnerships. Saturday morning, as I sat in the first-class lounge at Seattle-Tacoma Airport waiting for my flight, Jenny Martinez called. Marcus, you should know, Brandon hasn't left the office since Thursday. He's been sleeping on the couch in his office, reading everything he can find about Japanese business culture, Asian markets, relationship-based business practices. He even ordered Japanese language learning software. That's unexpected, I said. I think he finally understands what he almost destroyed. Tom from accounting said he heard Brandon crying in the bathroom yesterday. Actual tears. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy for the young man who had tried to destroy my career. But a larger part remembered the casual cruelty of his dismissal, the arrogant assumption that cultural sensitivity was weakness, the willingness to sacrifice years of relationship building for his own sense of power. Maybe he's learning, I said, but right now, I need to focus on saving this deal. The 13-hour flight to Tokyo gave me time to think about everything that had led to this moment. 12 years of building relationships, learning languages, understanding cultures. All of it had been dismissed as cultural handholding by someone who had never closed a significant deal in his life. But as I prepared for what could be the most important negotiation of my career, I realized that Brandon's arrogance had actually given me something valuable. Absolute clarity about what I brought to Sterling and Associates and what I was worth. Tokyo greeted me with its usual sensory overload. The organized chaos of Narita Airport, the blend of ancient traditions and cutting-edge technology, the respectful efficiency of Japanese business culture. As my taxi navigated the crowded streets toward downtown, I felt the familiar energy of a city that never quite slept but moved with purposeful precision. I had arrived on Sunday morning, giving me one full day to prepare for Monday's meeting. My first stop was the Conrad Tokyo, where I had booked a suite with views of Tokyo Bay. Not for luxury, but because I knew Mr. Tanaka's team would notice details like hotel choice and interpret them as indicators of respect and seriousness. After checking in, I made 3 important stops. First, to a traditional tea house in Asakusa, where I purchased a rare aged pure tea that I knew Mr. Tanaka would appreciate. Second, to a calligraphy shop near Sensoji Temple, where I commissioned a scroll with a Chinese poem about enduring partnerships. Third, to a sake brewery in Shibuya, where I selected a premium Junmai Daijinjo that had won national awards. These weren't bribes. They were expressions of respect, carefully chosen to demonstrate understanding of Japanese gift-giving customs and appreciation for the relationship we had built. Sunday evening, I called Mr. Tanaka's personal assistant to confirm the meeting details. Yuki answered on the first ring. Chun-san, Tanaka-san is looking forward to tomorrow's meeting. However, I must tell you that our legal team has prepared alternative contracts with 3 other American companies, just in case. My stomach dropped. I understand, Yuki-san. May I ask which companies? Henderson Corporation, Global Trade Associates, and Pinnacle International. All have expressed interest in partnerships similar to what we discussed with Sterling & Associates. Henderson Corporation, the same company whose mishandling of previous Japanese partnerships had led to the specific contract clauses that now made me indispensable. Global Trade Associates, a larger firm with more resources but no Asian cultural expertise. Pinnacle International, specialists in efficiency optimization who would probably make Brandon look culturally sensitive by comparison. Yuki-san, I appreciate Tanaka-san's prudent preparation. I hope to demonstrate tomorrow that Sterling & Associates remains the best partner for Sakura Industries' American expansion. Monday morning arrived gray and rainy, the kind of Tokyo weather that seemed to match the gravity of the situation. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not the American-cut Armani, but a more conservative navy suit I had purchased in Tokyo 2 years earlier from a tailor who specialized in business attire for international executives. The Sakura Industries headquarters occupied 43 floors of a gleaming tower in Shibuya, its architecture a perfect blend of traditional Japanese design principles and modern functionality. The lobby featured a stunning water feature surrounded by carefully tended bamboo, creating an atmosphere of calm professionalism. Mr. Tanaka met me personally in the lobby, an unusual honor that wasn't lost on me or the Sakura employees who witnessed it. At 58, Hiroshi Tanaka commanded respect through quiet authority rather than loud demands. His perfectly tailored suit was understated but expensive, his silver hair immaculately groomed, his bearing that of someone comfortable with power but not arrogant about it. Chun-san, he said, bowing slightly. Welcome back to Tokyo. I trust your flight was comfortable. Tanaka-san, I replied, returning his bow with exactly the appropriate depth and duration. Thank you for accommodating this additional meeting. I am honored by your continued confidence in our partnership. We were joined by 3 other Sakura executives, Kenji Nakamura, the CFO, Akiko Hayashi, the head of international development, and Satoshi Yamamoto, the legal counsel who had helped draft our original agreement. All were people I had worked with extensively over the past 18 months. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was conducted in respectful silence, but I could feel the tension. Everyone in that elevator knew that this meeting would determine not just the fate of a $12 million contract, but the future relationship between 2 companies that had invested significant time and resources in building trust. The conference room overlooked Tokyo Bay, with views of the Rainbow Bridge and the artificial islands that house some of Japan's most important industrial facilities. The table was set for a traditional business meeting, green tea already poured, documents neatly arranged, nameplates positioned with mathematical precision. Chun-san, Mr. Tanaka began once we were seated. Before we discuss contract details, I feel we must address the telephone conversation with Mr. Brandon Sterling. It was concerning. I had prepared for this moment, but it still felt like walking across a tightrope without a net. Tanaka-san, I owe you a profound apology on behalf of Sterling and Associates. Mr. Sterling's communication was inappropriate and did not represent our company's values or approach to international partnerships. He suggested that our negotiation process had been unnecessarily complicated by cultural considerations, Kenji Nakamura said, his tone carefully neutral, but his disapproval evident. He offered to streamline our final signing through video conference. I reached into my briefcase and withdrew the formal letter from Richard Sterling. With your permission, I would like to read a statement from Richard Sterling, our CEO and founder. Mr. Tanaka nodded. I read the letter in both English and Japanese, my pronunciation carefully practiced during the flight. To Mr. Hiroshi Tanaka and the leadership team of Sakura Industries, I write to personally apologize for any confusion caused by recent communications from Sterling and Associates. Cultural sensitivity is not just important to our company. It is fundamental to how we conduct business. The relationships we build with international partners are based on mutual respect, understanding, and appreciation for different ways of doing business. Marcus Chun speaks for Sterling and Associates in all matters related to our partnership with Sakura Industries, and I have complete confidence in his judgment and expertise. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Mr. Tanaka spoke. Chun-san, may I ask a direct question? Of course, Tanaka-san. Was Mr. Sterling authorized to speak on behalf of your company regarding our contract? This was the moment of truth. I could deflect, make excuses, try to smooth over Brandon's mistake with diplomatic language. Or I could tell the truth and trust that honesty would serve the relationship better than politics. No, Tanaka-san. Mr. Sterling acted without authorization and without understanding the terms of our agreement. His actions violated both company protocol and the specific provisions of our contract regarding authorized representatives. Another silence, longer this time. I see, Mr. Tanaka said finally. And what is Mr. Sterling's current role in your company? He has been removed from all client-facing responsibilities pending further review by our board of directors. Akiko Hayashi leaned forward. Chun-san, we have worked together for 18 months. In that time, you have demonstrated not just business expertise, but genuine respect for our culture and values. However, this incident raises questions about Sterling and Associates' commitment to the principles we have discussed. I understand your concerns, Hayashi-san. May I share something personal? She nodded. When I was fired last Thursday, yes, Mr. Sterling terminated my employment. I thought my career with Sterling and Associates was over. But then Mr. Richard Sterling called me, horrified by what had happened, asking me to return not just as an employee, but as Director of International Relations with full authority over all Asian partnerships. The surprise on their faces was evident. You were fired? Satoshi Yamamoto asked. For 18 hours. Mr. Sterling told me that cultural sensitivity was expensive overhead and that American business should focus on American values. He said I was bogging the company down with tradition and ceremony. I could see them processing this information, understanding now why they had received such a jarring phone call. But you returned, Mr. Tanaka observed. I returned because 15 families depend on the success of this partnership. I returned because I believe Sterling and Associates, under Richard Sterling's leadership, is committed to doing business the right way. And I returned because I value the relationship we have built together. Mr. Tanaka stood and walked to the window, looking out at Tokyo Bay. The rest of us sat in silence, waiting. Chun-san, he said without turning around. In Japanese business, we have a concept called ninjinsai, human relationships. It means that business is ultimately about people, not just contracts and profits. Hi, Tanaka-san. The young Mr. Sterling seems to believe that business is only about efficiency and profit maximization. This is a fundamental philosophical difference. He turned back to face the room. However, you have demonstrated consistently that you understand ninjinsai. You attended my father's funeral. You sent flowers when my daughter gave birth to her first child. You remember my son's university entrance exam results. You conduct business as if we are partners, not just contractual obligations. I felt a glimmer of hope. For this reason, Sakura Industries will honor our agreement with Sterling and Associates. But with conditions. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression calm and respectful. First, all future communications regarding this partnership must go through you personally. No other Sterling and Associates representative is authorized to make decisions or changes without your explicit approval. Understood and agreed, Tanaka-san. Second, any significant personnel changes affecting our partnership must be communicated to us in advance. We will not accept new representatives without proper introduction and relationship building. Agreed. Third, Sterling and Associates must demonstrate its commitment to cultural sensitivity through actions, not just words. We would like to establish a formal cultural exchange program. Sterling employees spending time at Sakura facilities in Japan, Sakura employees working with your team in Seattle. This was actually better than I'd hoped. We will be honored to participate in such a program, Tanaka-san. And finally, he said, his expression becoming more serious, if there is any repeat of last week's incident, any suggestion that our business practices are inefficient or our cultural values are obstacles to be overcome, our partnership will end immediately. You have my personal guarantee that will not happen. Mr. Tanaka returned to his seat and picked up his fountain pen. Then let us sign our agreement. The signing ceremony took exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes, conducted with the precision and respect that Japanese business culture demanded. Each page was reviewed carefully, each signature witnessed by multiple parties, each stamp applied with proper ceremony. When Mr. Tanaka and I signed the final page, I felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with proving that respect and relationship building weren't weaknesses. They were the foundation of lasting success. After the contracts were signed and sealed, Mr. Tanaka presented me with a gift. A beautiful fountain pen made from Japanese maple wood, inscribed with characters that meant enduring partnership. For the contracts you will sign in the future, Chun-san, he said with a rare smile. The celebration dinner that evening at a traditional kaiseki restaurant in Ginza was a masterclass in Japanese hospitality. 7 courses, each more exquisite than the last, accompanied by sake that had been aging since before I was born. The conversation flowed between business and personal topics, cementing relationships that would last for years. Chun-sen, Mr. Tanaka said as we reached the final course. May I ask what you learned from this experience? I considered the question carefully. I learned that crisis often reveals character, Tanaka-san, both in individuals and in organization. Sterling and Associates was tested, and I believe we passed that test. And the young Mr. Sterling? Time will tell whether he learned anything valuable or simply learned to be more careful about his arrogance. Mr. Tanaka nodded thoughtfully. In Japan, we believe that failure can be a great teacher, but only if the student is willing to truly listen to the lesson. The flight back to Seattle departed Tokyo at 11:30 p.m. Tuesday, giving me the entire 13-hour journey to process what had happened. As the plane lifted off from Narita, I watched the lights of Tokyo shrink below me and thought about the strange turns life can take. 5 days ago, I had been a terminated employee carrying his personal belongings in a cardboard box. Now I was returning with the largest contract in Sterling and Associates history, a promotion that would change my life, and the satisfaction of knowing that my expertise and approach had been validated in the most dramatic way possible. But more than that, I was returning with proof that cultural sensitivity wasn't a weakness or an anachronism. It was a competitive advantage that couldn't be replicated by someone who saw diversity as inefficiency and respect as overhead. I arrived back in Seattle on Tuesday evening to find the office buzzing with nervous energy. Word had leaked that I was returning from Tokyo, but no one knew the outcome of the negotiations. As I walked through the lobby with my briefcase and travel bag, conversations stopped and everyone turned to look at me. Richard Sterling was waiting for me at the elevator, his expression anxious but hopeful. "Well," he asked as the elevator doors closed. I reached into my briefcase and withdrew the signed contract. $12 million over 3 years, plus cultural exchange programs, plus introduction to Sakura's subsidiary companies throughout Asia. His relief was so profound that he actually staggered slightly. Thank God. Marcus, I can't thank you enough. You saved us. I saved the jobs of 15 good people, I corrected, and I proved that Sterling and Associates is still a company worth doing business with. What about Brandon? What about him? Did Tanaka mention him? Are there consequences? I looked at Richard Sterling, this man who had built a company through integrity and hard work, now facing the reality that his son had nearly destroyed it through arrogance and ignorance. Mr. Tanaka made it clear that any repeat of last week's incident will end our partnership immediately. Brandon is banned from any communication with Sakura Industries, and all future interactions must go through me personally. Richard nodded grimly. That's fair. More than fair, considering. The elevator doors opened on our floor, and I could see employees pretending to work while obviously waiting to hear news about the Tokyo trip. Richard, I said as we walked toward his office, I'd like to address the entire company. People deserve to know that their jobs are secure and that Sterling and Associates is moving forward stronger than before. 20 minutes later, the entire staff was gathered in the main conference room. I could see the tension on their faces, the fear that had been building for days, the uncertainty about their futures, the stress of watching their company nearly self-destruct. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard began, I'm pleased to announce that the Sakura Industries partnership has been successfully completed. The contract has been signed, and Sterling and Associates has secured its largest deal in company history. The relief in the room was palpable. I saw shoulders relax, saw smiles for the first time in days, saw people quietly reaching for their phones to share good news with family members. This success is entirely due to the exceptional work of Marcus Chun, Richard continued, who has been promoted to Director of International Relations with full authority over all Pacific Rim operations. The applause was genuine and sustained. I saw tears in Jenny's eyes, saw Tom from accounting actually stand up and cheer. These weren't just colleagues celebrating a business success. They were friends and family members celebrating the fact that their livelihoods were secure. Marcus has proven once again that Sterling and Associates' commitment to relationship-based business practices isn't just the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do, Richard said. Cultural sensitivity isn't overhead. It's a competitive advantage. Respect for our international partners isn't inefficiency. It's the foundation of lasting success. I noticed that Brandon wasn't in the room. As the meeting broke up and people returned to their desks, colleagues came up to congratulate me. Some I had worked with for years. Others were newer employees who barely knew me. But all of them seemed genuinely happy about the news, relieved that the crisis was over, and optimistic about the company's future. Jenny Martinez was the last to approach me. Marcus, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. Brandon has been a mess since you left for Tokyo. He hasn't gone home, hasn't changed clothes, has barely eaten. He's been reading everything he can find about Japanese culture, Asian business practices, relationship building. I think he finally understands what he almost destroyed. Where is he now? His office. He asked not to be disturbed during the company meeting. I think he was too ashamed to face everyone. I looked down the hallway toward Brandon's corner office. The lights were on, and I could see his silhouette through the frosted glass, hunched over his desk. Jenny, has he said anything? About what he learned, I mean. He asked me to research cultural sensitivity training programs. He wants to enroll in language classes, Japanese, Mandarin, Korean. He even asked if there were any books he would recommend about Asian business culture. I felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction at his apparent humiliation, curiosity about whether his change was genuine, and perhaps a small amount of sympathy for a young man who had just learned that actions have consequences. I'll talk to him, I said finally. Marcus, Jenny said, whatever you decide to do, just remember, he's still the boss's son. His future affects all of us. I knocked on Brandon's office door at 8:30 p.m. after most of the staff had gone home. The building was quiet except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Come in, came a voice that sounded nothing like the arrogant executive who had fired me 6 days earlier. Brandon looked up from his desk, and I was shocked by the change in his appearance. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. His expensive shirt was wrinkled and stained, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept properly in days. His desk was covered with books about Japanese culture, printouts of articles about Asian business practices, and what looked like beginner's language learning materials for Mandarin and Japanese. "Marcus," he said, standing up quickly and nearly knocking over a stack of books. "Congratulations on the Sakura deal. I heard it went well." "Thank you." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same chair I had sat in when he fired me. "Please sit down. I wanted to talk to you." I remained standing. "What did you want to discuss?" He sat back down heavily, looking suddenly much younger than his 28 years. "I wanted to apologize. Not the corporate apology I gave you last week, but a real one. I fucked up, Marcus. I fucked up so badly that I almost destroyed everything my father built." "Yes, you did. I've been reading about Japanese business culture," he said, gesturing to the books on his desk. "About guanxi and Chinese business. About nunchi and Korean relationships. I'm starting to understand what you do, what you've built with these clients." "And what is it that I do, Brandon?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "You build trust. Real trust, based on genuine respect and understanding. You don't just learn languages, you learn cultures. You don't just close deals, you create partnerships that last for years. That's part of it. I call Mr. Tanaka because I thought I could fix what I'd broken," he continued, his voice getting quieter. "I thought I could use my MBA knowledge and American efficiency to salvage the deal. I had no idea that I was making everything worse. What did you think would happen? I thought he'd be impressed by my directness, my focus on results over process. I thought cultural considerations were just politeness, I guess. Nice to have, but not essential." I finally sat down, studying his face for signs of genuine understanding versus self-pity. And now I realized that what I called cultural considerations were actually the foundation of the entire relationship. When I suggested that the negotiation process was unnecessarily complicated, I was basically telling him that everything he valued was worthless. "That's exactly what you were doing." He put his head in his hands. "I spent 48 hours researching Sakura Industries after you left for Tokyo. Do you know what I found? Tell me." "They've been in business for over 100 years. For generations of the same family. They've turned down partnerships with companies twice our size because they didn't trust them. They specifically chose Sterling and Associates because of the relationship you built with Mr. Tanaka over 18 months. And I threw it all away in a 10-minute phone call because I thought I knew better." He looked up at me, his eyes red with exhaustion and stress. "Marcus, I don't just owe you an apology. I owe you my job, my future, my father's legacy. You could have let the deal die. You could have let me fail completely. Instead, you saved us." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. "Brandon, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why did you really fire me? And don't give me the efficiency speech. What was the real reason?" He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because you made me feel stupid." "Explain that." "Every time there was a meeting about Asian markets, you were the expert. You knew things I didn't know, had relationships I couldn't replicate, spoke languages I'd never learned. You'd mention some cultural detail or business practice, and everyone would nod like it was obvious, and I'd be sitting there wondering what the hell you were talking about. So you fired me. I thought if I got rid of you, I could rebuild those relationships my way. Simpler, more straightforward, more American. I thought I could prove that all that cultural stuff was just unnecessary complexity. And how did that work out?" He laughed bitterly. "I destroyed the most important deal in the company's history with a single phone call." I stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle was lit up against the night sky, and I could see the ferries making their evening runs across Elliott Bay. "Brandon, do you want to know what the worst part of last week was for me?" "What?" "It wasn't being fired. It wasn't the humiliation or the fear about my future. It was the casual way you dismissed 12 years of expertise as cultural handholding. You didn't just fire me. You invalidated everything I'd worked for." "I know, and I'm sorry. Truly sorry." I turned back to face him. "Sorry isn't enough." His face fell. "I know. What What would be enough? Prove that you've learned something. Prove that you understand why relationship-based business practices aren't weaknesses, they're strengths. Prove that you could be the kind of leader this company needs. How do I do that? Start by actually learning about the markets you want to work in. Not just reading books, but really understanding the cultures, the values, the ways of doing business. Spend time with our international partners. Listen more than you talk. Ask questions instead of making assumptions. Would you be willing to teach me? The question surprised me. A week ago, this man had tried to destroy my career. Now he was asking me to mentor him. I'll consider it, I said, but only if you prove you're serious. Real change, not just crisis management. What would that look like? Start with the cultural exchange program that Mr. Tanaka requested. Spend 6 months at Sakura's facilities in Japan. Learn the language, understand the culture, build relationships with their team. Show them that Sterling and Associates is committed to partnership, not just profit. His eyes widened. 6 months in Japan? Are you afraid of that? Terrified, he admitted. But yes. If that's what it takes, yes. I walked toward the door, then paused. Brandon, there's something else you need to understand. What's that? I didn't save a Sakura deal to help you. I saved it to protect the jobs of 15 good people who don't deserve to pay for your mistakes. I saved it because Sterling and Associates, under your father's leadership, is still a company worth fighting for. I understand. Do you? Because the next time you feel threatened by someone's expertise, the next time you want to prove your authority by dismissing someone else's knowledge, remember this week. Remember what almost happened. I will. As I reached for the door handle, he spoke again. Marcus? Thank you. For everything. I didn't respond. Words were easy. Actions would prove whether he had really learned anything or just learned to be more careful with his arrogance. 3 months later, Sterling and Associates had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The Sakura Industries partnership had opened doors throughout Asia exactly as predicted. We now had active negotiations with companies in South Korea, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. Our international division had grown from 5 employees to 23, and we were seriously considering opening a satellite office in Tokyo. Brandon had indeed proven serious about change. He was currently 3 months into his 6-month residency at Sakura's facilities in Japan, and the reports I received from Mr. Tanaka were surprisingly positive. Sterling Cohen works very hard. Mr. Tanaka had told me during our monthly video call. His Japanese is improving, and more importantly, he listens before speaking. He asks good questions and shows genuine respect for our ways of doing business. The transformation hadn't been easy. Brandon's first month in Japan had been difficult. Culture shock, language barriers, and the humbling experience of being a beginner in everything from business etiquette to using chopsticks properly. But he had stuck with it, and gradually, he was earning the respect of the Sakura team. Jenny Martinez had become my unofficial deputy, helping manage the expanded international division while I traveled frequently to meet with new potential partners. Tom from accounting had been promoted to senior financial analyst for international contracts. Sarah from reception had enrolled in evening classes to learn Mandarin, hoping to transfer to our international team. The office culture had changed too. There was a new emphasis on cultural awareness, relationship building, and respectful communication. Richard Sterling had instituted monthly training sessions on international business practices, and we now had a policy requiring cultural sensitivity training for any employee working with international clients. But the most significant change was in the company's approach to leadership development. Instead of assuming that MBA knowledge translated directly to business success, we now required all management candidates to spend time in client-facing roles, building relationships and demonstrating cultural competence before being promoted to executive positions. One Friday evening in December, as I was preparing to leave for a client meeting in Seoul, my phone rang. It was Brandon calling from Tokyo. Marcus, do you have a few minutes? Sure. How are things going? Good. Really good, actually. I wanted to tell you about something that happened yesterday. I'm listening. There was a problem with one of our shipments, a documentation error that held up a delivery to one of Sakura's biggest customers. It was going to cost them a lot of money and damage their relationship with this client. What did you do? I remember what you taught me about taking responsibility and finding solutions instead of assigning blame. I worked with the Sakura team to identify alternative suppliers, negotiated expedited shipping, and personally delivered the materials to the customer with a formal apology letter. And the customer was so impressed with how we handled the crisis that they asked about expanding their partnership with us. We might have turned a disaster into a new opportunity. I felt a genuine sense of pride, not just in the business outcome, but in the growth Brandon had shown. That's excellent work. Marcus, I need to tell you something else. What's that? I understand now why you do this job. It's not just about closing deals or generating revenue. It's about building something lasting, something based on mutual respect and shared success. That's exactly right. Why get back to Seattle next month? I want to continue learning from you. Not as the boss's son who thinks he knows everything, but as someone who's just beginning to understand what real leadership looks like. After hanging up, I sat in my office looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city was preparing for the holidays. Lights were going up on buildings. The famous Christmas tree was being installed at Westlake Center, and there was that particular energy that comes with the end of a successful year. My daughter Emily had just finished her third year of pre-med with a 4.0 GPA. The promotion and salary increase had eliminated my worries about tuition payments, and she was already talking about medical school programs that specialized in international health, inspired, she said, by stories of my work building relationships across cultures. Richard Sterling had announced his intention to step back from day-to-day operations over the next 2 years, transitioning to a chairman role while the next generation of leadership took over. The succession plan he was developing involved both Brandon and me in key leadership roles, a partnership that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had tried to destroy my career was now learning from me, and together we were building something stronger than either of us could have created alone. 1 year after the day Sterling fired me, I found myself standing in the same conference room where it had all begun, but this time addressing a very different kind of meeting. The room was packed with Sterling and Associates employees, client representatives from 7 different countries, and business school students who had come to hear about our relationship-based international expansion model. The past 12 months have been transformative beyond my wildest expectations. The Sakura partnership had indeed opened the doors we had hoped for, leading to contracts worth over $80 million across the Pacific Rim. We had established offices in Tokyo and Singapore, employed local cultural liaisons in 12 countries, and developed what was being called the Sterling method of international business development. But the real transformation hadn't been in our revenue numbers. It had been in our approach to leadership, respect, and the value of diverse expertise. Brandon had returned from Japan 6 months earlier as a genuinely changed person. His arrogance had been replaced by humility, his impatience with thoughtful consideration, his assumptions with genuine curiosity. He still had moments of youthful enthusiasm that needed to be channeled, but he had learned to listen before speaking and to ask questions instead of making declarations. More importantly, he had become one of the most effective advocates for cultural sensitivity training in the company, often sharing stories of his mistakes in Japan and what he had learned from them. Ladies and gentlemen, I began my presentation. I want to tell you about the worst day of my professional life and how it became the catalyst for the best year in Sterling and Associates history. I told them about being fired for cultural handholding, about the 18 hours when I thought my career was over, about the phone call that changed everything. I talked about the flight to Tokyo, the crucial negotiation with Mr. Tanaka, and the lessons we had all learned about the value of relationship-based business practices. But most importantly, I talked about redemption and growth. The young executive who fired me is sitting in this room today, I said, looking directly at Brandon, who had the grace to smile ruefully. And I'm proud to say that he has become one of our most effective international business developers, currently leading our expansion into Southeast Asian markets. The audience turned to look at Brandon, who stood up briefly and gave a small bow, a gesture he had learned during his time in Japan. This story isn't about revenge, I continued. It's about the importance of recognizing expertise wherever it exists, respecting different approaches to achieving success, and understanding that true leadership means empowering others rather than diminishing them. After the presentation, during the networking reception, Mr. Tanaka approached me. He had flown in from Tokyo specifically for this event, bringing with him the CEOs of 3 other Japanese companies that were now Sterling and Associates clients. "Chun-san," he said, "I wanted to congratulate you on your success, but more importantly, on your character. You could have allowed Sterling-kun to fail completely. Instead, you chose to teach him. That is true leadership." "Thank you, Tanaka-san. But I think we all learned something valuable from that experience." "Indeed. And I have news that I think will interest you." "What's that?" "The Japan-America Business Council has asked me to nominate someone for their annual Cultural Bridge Award, recognizing individuals who have made exceptional contributions to international business relationships. I have nominated you." I was genuinely surprised. "Tanaka-san, that's a tremendous honor. It is well-deserved. Your approach to international business, the emphasis on relationships, cultural understanding, and mutual respect, is becoming a model that other companies are trying to replicate." Later that evening, after the last guest had left, I found myself alone in the conference room with Richard and Brandon Sterling. Father and son sat side by side, both looking relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen since Brandon's return from Wharton. "Marcus," Richard said, "I have something I want to discuss with you." "I'm listening." "As you know, I'll be transitioning to chairman over the next 18 months. The board has asked me to recommend candidates for CEO, and I want you to consider the position." I was stunned. "Richard, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm the right fit for overall company leadership. My expertise is in international markets. Your expertise is in building relationships and developing people," he interrupted. "You've proven that with clients, with colleagues, and yes, even with my son. That's exactly what a CEO needs to be able to do." Brandon leaned forward. "Marcus, I hope you'll consider it. I know I'd be proud to work for you." The transformation in that young man never ceased to amaze me. A year ago, he had seen me as a threat to his authority. Now he was advocating for me to become his boss. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But right now, I'm happy doing what I'm doing, building bridges between cultures and helping other people develop their own expertise." "That's exactly why you'd be a great CEO," Richard said with a smile. As I drove home that night through the familiar streets of Seattle, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. Queen and Hill looked the same as it had a year ago, but everything else had changed. My career, my relationships, my understanding of what was possible when you refuse to let other people's limitations define your potential. I thought about my daughter Emily, now preparing for medical school and talking about specializing in international health diplomacy. I thought about the young employees at Sterling and Associates who were learning languages and studying cultures because they had seen the value of international expertise. I thought about Brandon Sterling, transformed from an arrogant MBA into a thoughtful leader who understood that strength comes from empowering others, not diminishing them. But most of all, I thought about the moment in Conference Room B when Brandon had told me that cultural sensitivity was expensive overhead. That moment of casual dismissal had led to 18 months of growth, learning, and success that none of us could have imagined. 2 years later, I stood on the balcony of our new Tokyo office, looking out at the sprawling metropolis that had become our gateway to Asia. The Sterling and Associates Tokyo branch now employed 43 people from 7 different countries, and our cultural integration model was being studied by business schools throughout Japan and the United States. Brandon had just returned from a successful negotiation in Seoul, where he had closed a partnership with a technology company that would bring our annual Asian market revenue to over $200 million. Watching him present the deal to our board via video conference, I saw a confident leader who had learned to combine American ambition with Asian patience, Western efficiency with Eastern respect for relationships. The Japan-America Business Council had indeed awarded me their Cultural Bridge Award 6 months earlier, and the ceremony had been attended by business leaders from across the Pacific Rim. But the award I was most proud of was simpler, a hand-carved wooden plaque that the Sakura Industries team had given me, inscribed with the Japanese characters for trusted friend. That evening, as I was preparing to catch a flight back to Seattle, my phone rang. It was Jenny Martinez calling from the home office. "Marcus, I have news," she said, barely able to contain her excitement. "Good news, I hope." "The best. Richard officially announced his retirement today, and the board voted unanimously to name you as the new CEO of Sterling and Associates." I sat down heavily in my hotel room chair, looking out at the Tokyo skyline. 2.5 years ago, I had been a fired employee carrying his belongings in a cardboard box. Now I was being offered the leadership of a company that had grown from 80 employees to over 200, from $50 million in annual revenue to over $300 million, from a regional consultancy to an international powerhouse. "Marcus, are you there?" "I'm here. Just processing." "So you'll accept?" I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment, the humiliation, the doubt, the gradual rebuilding of confidence and purpose. I thought about the relationships I had built, the bridges I had constructed between cultures and individuals who had seemed impossibly different. "Yes," I said finally. "Yes, I'll accept." The flight back to Seattle gave me time to think about what kind of CEO I wanted to be. Not the authoritarian model that Brandon had initially tried to emulate, and not the purely collaborative approach that sometimes lacked direction. Something different, leadership based on empowerment, respect for expertise wherever it existed, and the understanding that true strength comes from building others up rather than tearing them down. When I walked into the Sterling and Associates lobby the next morning, there was a banner stretched across the reception area. "Congratulations, CEO Chun." The entire staff was gathered, applauding and cheering as I made my way through the crowd. Richard Sterling was waiting for me at the elevator, beaming with pride. "Ready for the big chair?" he asked. "As ready as anyone can be. You'll do great. You've already proven that you understand what real leadership looks like." As we rode up to what would now be my office, he handed me a small package wrapped in traditional Japanese paper. "A gift from an old friend," he said. Inside was a fountain pen, not expensive or ornate, but beautifully crafted from bamboo. The accompanying note was written in careful English. "For the contracts you will sign as CEO, with respect and friendship, H. Tanaka." The board meeting that afternoon was unlike any I had ever attended. Instead of sitting at the side of the room as a department head, I was now at the head of the table, looking at the faces of people who were trusting me to lead the company into its next phase of growth. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "I want to start by acknowledging that this transition represents more than just a change in leadership. It represents a commitment to the principles that have made our international expansion so successful: respect for diverse expertise, investment in long-term relationships, and the understanding that our greatest strength lies in empowering every member of our team to excel." I looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "We're going to continue growing, but we're going to do it the right way. We're going to value cultural competence as highly as financial performance. We're going to invest in our people's development, not just our profit margins. And we're going to remember that sustainable success is built on trust, not transactions." The vote to approve my strategic plan was unanimous. After the meeting, I found Brandon waiting in my new office. He was holding a bottle of champagne and wearing a genuine smile. "Congratulations, boss," he said, emphasizing the last word with obvious pleasure rather than resentment. "Thank you. And Brandon, I have something I want to discuss with you." "What's that?" "I'm promoting you to Executive Vice President of International Operations. You'll be my second in command for all overseas expansion, reporting directly to me, but with full operational authority for day-to-day management." His eyes widened. "Marcus, are you sure? After everything that happened, especially because of everything that happened, you've proven that people can grow, can learn from their mistakes, can become better leaders through experience and humility. That's exactly the kind of person I want helping me run this company." He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him processing the significance of the moment. 2.5 years ago, he had fired me from the same office. Now I was promoting him to the highest position he had ever held. "I won't let you down," he said finally. "I know you won't, because you understand now what real leadership looks like." That evening, I had dinner with my daughter Emily, who was now in her first year of medical school and planning to specialize in international health policy. As we sat in a restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay, watching the ferries make their evening runs, she raised her glass in a toast. "To my dad," she said, "who proved that dignity and expertise are more powerful than arrogance in politics." "To second chances," I replied, "and to the understanding that our greatest challenges often become our greatest opportunities." As we clinked glasses, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The casual cruelty of being dismissed as culturally narrow had led to the most successful period of my career. The humiliation of being fired had ultimately resulted in promotion to CEO. The attempt to diminish my expertise had instead validated its importance in ways I never could have imagined. But the real victory wasn't the title or the salary or even the satisfaction of proving my worth. The real victory was the knowledge that I had responded to disrespect with dignity, to arrogance with patience, and to attempts at destruction with constructive growth. I had been underestimated by someone who overestimated himself. And in the end, that underestimation had become the foundation for success that neither of us could have anticipated. The Sterling and Associates Annual International Conference was held in Singapore this year, bringing together over 300 employees, clients, and partners from across the Pacific Rim. As I stood at the podium in the Marina Bay Sands Conference Center, looking out at faces representing dozens of cultures and countries, I reflected on how far we had all come. Brandon Sterling, now 35 and executive vice president, was sitting in the front row next to his wife Yuki, a Japanese marketing executive he had met during his extended stay at Sakura Industries. Their one-year-old daughter, Emiko, was sleeping peacefully in Yuki's arms, a living symbol of the bridges we had built between cultures. 5 years ago, I began my keynote address. I was fired from this company for being too focused on cultural sensitivity. Today, that same cultural sensitivity has helped us build partnerships worth over $500 million and create opportunities for hundreds of employees across 3 continents. The audience laughed and applauded, but they were also listening intently. Many of them had heard this story before, but had become something of a legend within our company, proof that expertise and dignity could triumph over arrogance and ignorance. "The lesson isn't that revenge is sweet," I continued. "The lesson is that when we're underestimated, we have a choice. We can become bitter and vindictive, or we can use that underestimation as motivation to prove our worth through excellence and integrity." After the conference, Mr. Tanaka, now in his mid-60s but still sharp and engaged, approached me at the closing reception. "Chun-san," he said, "I've been thinking about our first meeting after the unfortunate incident with young Sterling-kun. Do you remember what I told you about bamboo and oak trees? That bamboo bends in the storm while oak trees break." "Exactly. You were the bamboo, flexible enough to survive the storm, but strong enough to grow back even taller than before." He paused, looking around at the diverse crowd of business professionals mingling and networking in multiple languages. "And Sterling-kun has learned to be bamboo as well. That is perhaps the greatest success of all." As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself on the hotel's observation deck, looking out at the Singapore skyline. The city-state was a perfect metaphor for what we had built at Sterling and Associates, a place where East met West, where different cultures blended into something stronger than any single tradition could create alone. My phone buzzed with a text message from my daughter Emily, now Dr. Emily Chun, working with Doctors Without Borders in Southeast Asia, saw the conference coverage online. "So proud of everything you've built, Dad. Your approach to leadership is inspiring medical teams around the world." Brandon joined me on the observation deck, looking relaxed and confident in a way that would have been impossible during his arrogant MBA days. "Marcus," he said, "I have something I want to tell you." "What's that?" "Next month marks 6 years since I fired you. I know it's a strange anniversary to remember, but I think about it every year because it was the day that changed both of our lives." "How so?" "It was the day I learned that real strength comes from admitting weakness, that real leadership means empowering others, and that cultural differences aren't obstacles to overcome. They're advantages to embrace." He looked out at the glittering city below us. If I hadn't made that mistake, if I hadn't been so arrogant and short-sighted, neither of us would be where we are today. Sometimes I wonder if the universe put us both through that experience because we needed to learn something important. And what do we learn? That underestimating someone else says more about your limitations than theirs. That expertise deserves respect regardless of where it comes from. And that the best leaders are the ones who make other people better. As I flew back to Seattle the next day, I thought about the strange path that had led me from a fired employee to the CEO of an international consulting firm. The cardboard box that had held my possessions on that humiliating day 6 years ago was now displayed in my office. Not as a reminder of failure, but as a symbol of resilience and the importance of never letting others define your worth. The fountain pen that Mr. Tanaka had given me after our first successful negotiation was still on my desk, now accompanied by similar gifts from business partners in over 20 countries. Each one represented a relationship built on mutual respect, cultural understanding, and the patient work of building trust across linguistic and cultural barriers. But the most meaningful item in my office was simpler, a small frame photo of the Sterling and Associates International team taken at our Singapore conference. 47 people from 16 countries, all working together toward common goals while maintaining their unique cultural perspectives and expertise. In the center of the photo, Brandon Sterling stood next to me, both of us smiling genuinely. The man who had once seen cultural sensitivity as weakness now spoke 3 languages fluently and was raising a bilingual daughter who would grow up understanding that diversity is strength. The final lesson of my journey wasn't about workplace revenge or even professional vindication. It was about the transformative power of refusing to let someone else's limitations become your own. When Brandon Sterling fired me for being culturally narrow, he thought he was eliminating a threat to his authority. Instead, he created an opportunity for both of us to become better leaders, better people, and better bridges between the diverse world we live in. Sometimes the people who try to tear you down end up being the very people who teach you just how strong you really are. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they learn something valuable in the process too. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't revenge at all. It's success built on the very qualities that others tried to diminish, shared generously with those wise enough to recognize their value.